Today on Around the Coin, I interview Uri Klarman, the CEO of BloxRoute Labs. First off, we talk about the name, how he came up with it, and his thoughts on the name. Uri is a master, maybe one of only a few people in the world who specialize in blockchain network scalability. BloxRoute is a blockchain distribution network that helps in scaling blockchains of thousands of transactions a second on chain. So we talked about technically how they structure what they built, how he splits up the consensus layer, or how he explains the difference between the consensus layer and the networking layer, and what they've done technically to build out the fastest information network in blockchain world. So Uri is an awesome character, just got a great personality and very optimistic about the future. And he's obviously incredibly technically savvy as well. He has his Ph.D. in computer science from Northwestern University with a focus on this interdisciplinary networks research. So we hear all about his story and what makes BloxRoute so successful. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Uri Klarman. Uri, I'm excited to be chatting with you, man. You got such awesome energy. Yeah. So you're running a really cool company, BloxRoute Labs, spelled BLOX Route Labs. I'd love to start there. Usually I'll ask about the company background or how you get into it, but tell me about this name. What does the name mean to you?
So I will tell you, but let's start with this. Anybody out there who is starting a company, think deeply and closely about the name of your company, not only if it makes sense and it's cool, but is it easy or hard to pronounce? Okay, I wouldn't go for BloxRoute Labs, which is a mouthful nowadays. So but we're already here. We're not changing it. We'll go BloxRoute because we route blocks. I'll tell you more about it in a second. But really, take it from somebody who did it wrong. Like BloxRoute is so hard to say. Choose something like Nifty or I don't know, something like that, something cool, something easy that rolls off the tongue. So what we do, as the name suggests, we route blocks. So we have a networking infrastructure that propagate blocks and transactions. So if you know crypto, if you know blockchain, etc., people are making transactions. They are being sent around. Blocks containing them float around. They need to reach everybody. We propagate them roughly at the speed of light. So not quite at the speed of light, but almost under 150 milliseconds or so is our average. And we do that because it helps people make better trades in DeFi. We can totally dive deeper into that. But the core of what we do is that we, send stuff fast around the internet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you emphasize speed. Is that a very important component of what you're doing, the speed of it?
So it is a very important component. We're very much about connectivity. So speed and latency is very much is very important to that. I actually have a Ph.D. in computer science, more specifically computer networks, and even more specifically the blockchain network layer. So basically I have a Ph.D. in the connectivity of different nodes in the blockchain network and latency and the connectivity. Speed is very important. Also, who you're connected is very important to adding value there. But yeah, that's kind of it turns out it's very, very important to see information fast and to act on it fast if you're trading. Just like in traditional finance, you see something like an opportunity, arbitrage, liquidation, I know, a trade you want to make. And if you're the first one to see it and execute on it and capture it, then you make more money. And if it takes you, let's say, 5 seconds to see it, then you miss the boat. Everybody already bought or sold, and okay, you're losing. Does that make sense?
Totally. I'm curious. So you did your PhD, I think, from 2014 to 2018 at Northwestern in Chicago. Given the unique specialization that you explored with blockchain in computer science, networking within blockchain within networking within computer science, I'm curious. That time frame to me seems so early to have even a PhD available. Who is teaching that course? Who is enrolled in that course at that time? And how has it evolved even throughout the time you were there?
So it's funny. So I did my PhD under my advisor, then advisor, now co-founder, Professor Kuzmanovic. But at the time, I came to do a PhD in computer networks. It was really early. And I actually came, so I'm originally from Israel. I was a software engineer back then. And then me and my wife had a discussion. We said, listen, just working in the industry kind of sucked. If you're a software engineer, you work all the time. You wake up, you go there, you only come back late at night. I decided to go to academia, put everything behind me, go to do fun and cool stuff in academia. And I had a really good click with Alex, Professor Alex Kuzmanovic, and decided to do my PhD at Northwestern University here. And we were doing all sorts of just regular networking stuff. And then we had what the way it works in academia, especially in computer science, so you make a project, you write a paper on it, and then you kind of forget about it and you go do something completely else. And then that paper either gets accepted or doesn't, usually doesn't. Okay, it's you can see Nobel Prize winners kind of keep on the wall here's my response from Nature or Science saying this is not good enough to get published. So in science, things don't get published. It doesn't mean you're bad. It's just the way it is. So we were doing a few projects, and we had a project which was really cool and really interesting, but we didn't manage to publish it anywhere that we wanted. And so we kind of we already had the system and we had the data, and we pivoted it into something like a blockchain system. But instead of proof of work and hashing, etc., the idea that what it does is that it's kind of it scans the internet, the entire internet. It's called indexing. Basically, what Google does to tell you to which website to go. Just go all over it and index the internet, and as a byproduct, create an index which can compete with Google. But again, a scientific project. This is not BloxRoute, but we kind of fell down the crypto and blockchain rabbit hole. So we kind of, okay, we did this. What else can we do in blockchains? And then we kind of found a gold mine, because we're networking people. I think I'm the first and maybe the only one with a PhD in the studying the blockchain network layer. There are people with blockchain related PhDs out there for sure. But I think I was the first with a PhD specifically on the network there. And we were really among the first networking people to get into this space, because, crypto is coming, its roots and origins come from the cypherpunk movement of the 90s, etc. Really cool people, very smart people, know about cryptography way better than me. But cryptographer people, there's a problem. Anything they look at is kind of, well, let's make up a zero knowledge protocol to solve this problem. It's when you have a hammer, then every problem is a nail. It's kind of like that. Everything we'll come up with a trustless protocol that does this and that, etc. And we, as the networking people, came into the space, and we were looking. Our first angle coming into this space was kind of let's see what happened to block, how they propagate transaction, how they propagate. And this is 2016 or so. We, with the big the block size debate, okay, with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and should the block stay at 1 megabyte or should they be increased? And it's giant, everybody are arguing about it. It's not even on Twitter. All of it is in Reddit, okay? Because at the time Reddit was the hot stuff and where everything was happening. And we were wait, did you know that you actually, how big blocks are really depend how fast information propagates. If you make blocks bigger, let's say 10 times bigger, then for me to send it over the wire takes 10 times longer. So instead of everybody hearing about a new block really fast and the consensus and the blockchain work, it's kind of well, no, you can't make it 100x bigger because the entire thing come crashing down. And that was the starting point of BloxRoute. They just we can propagate transactions, and then we can propagate blocks and propagate really fast. And our original vision was actually on the scaling side. It's kind of well, listen, we can take blocks, even if they're really, really big, and propagate them, again, almost at the speed of light. And that's scalability. And that was kind of like the angle we were aiming at the time. And we built this, I call it a networking infrastructure, but for those, like, what does that even mean? Like, we have a bunch of servers, like 35 of them around the world, and they're very well optimized to hear about information and then send it really fast to everybody else. So if you're a miner or a validator or a pool, like you create a new block, you send it to us, boom, we kind of like broadcast to everybody else really fast. And we do the same for transactions. We help information propagate fast. Anyway, so we were doing this. And then in 2020, when the DeFi summer really happened, we had a bit of a oh shit moment. It was kind of like, wait, if we see information faster, or we allow our customers to see information faster, and they can see opportunities and then send their transactions to the pools or the validators or the miners fast to capture that, then they can make more money. This is like Flash Boys for DeFi. I don't know, we were talking about Chicago earlier. Like, Flash Boys are the people who put a optic fiber wire between Chicago and New York. Because if you're half a millisecond faster than everybody else, you're in New York, prices crash, the market crashed, you're the first one to reach Chicago, you sell in Chicago first, before the prices, before everybody else, you make more money. So that's Flash Boys. They're very big. There was a very big, it's like a company called IEX. Flash Boys is the name of the book that was written about them. And this is this is like in CeFi and in traditional finance. And we had this like, oh shit, like we can do this, but in DeFi, because DeFi is slightly different than CeFi, okay? In traditional finance, in CeFi, if you're a giant market maker, if you're a big trader or something like that, CeFi is point to point. So you need to be connected to Chicago, New York, London, Japan, Hong Kong, Amsterdam, Shanghai, and you're good. That's basically the points you need to be connected with. You want to co-locate, you want to have your bots or trading, whatever, sitting literally at the exchanges or at the like stock exchanges. And these are the points you want to be connected. That's where all the information goes to. This is where all the information comes from. But in DeFi, it's a completely different setup, okay? This is not point to point, it's peer to peer, right? So important information can come from anywhere in the network, right? Somebody from Australia can come and say, sell 10,000 ETH on Uniswap, okay? Or from Africa or from India or Europe or somewhere, right? Or an Oracle comes out and sends a transaction, says, price of ETH is now $2,000. And you need to see that, right? If you want to be a competitive actor in DeFi, you need to see trades, you need to see prices, and your block comes out, right? And he said like, oh, here are the prices, here are the arbitrage opportunity, here's the price. Maybe you want to buy that price, maybe you want to sell that price. I don't know. I'm not much of a trader myself. I'm a terrible trader myself, but I'm a provider of tools for traders. And so in DeFi, you can't be connected to to 5 different points. You need to be connected with everyone in the network, on multiple networks, actually. You need to be connected to Ethereum and Polygon and, I don't know, BSD and Solana, I don't know, all these, because the same assets are being traded everywhere. And so if somebody sells something or buys something, or there is a major change or liquidation, all these stuff happening somewhere, it could come from anywhere. But unlike traditional finance, you can't co-locate, you can't connect with everyone. You can go to all the validators and say, like, I'm a trader and I want to connect with you all. They're like, you're not connected with my, like, they're not willing to connect with you, right? You could DDoS them, right? You could spam them and slow them down. And they're definitely not, everybody out there who want to connect to my node, go ahead. No, they hide their nodes. They connect it to very few others out there. So you can't imagine, I don't know, Jump Trading and Jane Street or something like that. Oh, let's connect our nodes to work nicely together so you can see my information fast. No, this is PvP, right? They're fighting against one another. So there isn't a way to get connected to everybody out there. And this is kind of like where we come in. Okay, we're like the flash boys for DeFi. We hear it from everywhere. We're connected like 1,000 different important nodes out there, projects and validators and pools and miners and traders. And as I said earlier, we're almost at the speed of light. So we allow them to see information fast, act on it. Like, do I want to make a buy? Do I want to sell? Like, did price change? Is there an arbitrage opportunity? Is that a liquidation opportunity? All these kind of stuff. And then act on it really fast. And that just makes them more competitive. And this is kind of like, it wasn't where we started. When we started with BloxRoute, we're like, we knew the network layer was important. We built this before DeFi was DeFi. But then when DeFi happened, it was like, wait, okay, I knew it was valuable, but like I didn't know how valuable this until like, okay, it actually kind of like came to fruition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of it did. I want to ask you a couple of things though, because conceptually I have the distinguishing components between CeFi and DeFi, and I think most people do. Tell me if you agree with this, that the difference between CeFi and DeFi is the number of nodes in the network. So CeFi is, you mentioned Shanghai and New York, there's maybe 5, whereas DeFi might be 5,000 or 5 million. But conceptually, are they the same?
Yes and no. There are like a few, let's throw 3 key differences between them, from the obvious to the less obvious, okay? In CeFi, let's think about the transitioning from traditional finance and CeFi into DeFi. What changes? Well, in CeFi, you have like order books and backroom, transactions. And in DeFi, you have smart contracts on chain, right? It's kind of like, that's one major difference, right? Like, there isn't a single, everybody interact with smart contracts on chain. It's not that like, it's the New York Exchange or the CME or somebody else. No, it's running on chain. Nobody controls it. And, it wasn't obvious for all of us back in 2016, 2017, what it would look like, but now it's 2022. Like it might, okay. Instead of like, matchmaking engines and back office, you have smart contracts. That's kind of like difference number 1. And difference number 2 is that instead of like trade flow or price flows and trading flows happening in traditional finance and co-location, here you have transactions propagating around and blocks propagating around. So if you're trying to conceptualize that, then in traditional finance, you have like trade orders kind of like being sent from actors who participate to this like main point out there. And in DeFi, it kind of like propagates around, right? All the nodes are connected. I create a transaction. I send it to everybody I know. They kind of like send it to everybody they know. And eventually it would get to the miner or the validator or the pool, and they would kind of like introduce it into a block. So you could think about it as kind of like more and more transactions constantly being created, floating around in the network. And every so often a block comes and says, oh, we added this chunk onto the chain. And the blocks also propagate in a very similar manner. Side note on this. This is why also, especially when people talk about in Ethereum, about the mempool. Okay, mempool are transactions which people made, but they didn't made it to the chain yet, right? They're unconfirmed transactions. People trying to make a transaction, but they didn't happen yet. There isn't such a thing as the mempool, okay? At any given time, everybody have a slightly different view of the mempool. So you have like mempool views, and they're not necessarily, they can't necessarily even agree with one another, right? If I create 2 conflicting transactions, right? I have one ETH and I send it to you, and I create a conflicting transaction sending it to somebody else. These would propagate, and half or some portion of the network would think one is in the mempool and the other would consider the other, but never both at the same time, because they can't be at the same time. And so people see different views of that. And I'll add to this model in your mind that transactions are constantly being added, right? So every second, something like 15 transactions or so are being like injected from everywhere. So there are more and more transactions And it kind of like, think of it as like water flowing from it. Like by the time they think about this, well, there are new transactions are coming on the other direction. This is kind of like the flow of things. So that was the second difference between CeFi and DeFi. Just that like you don't have like trade flows. That you have transaction propagation and block propagation. And the third and the least obvious of them is what I said earlier, that traditional finance is point to point, that you only need to be connected with very few. And DeFi is peer-to-peer. It is really many, many nodes in the order of thousands and tens of thousands, maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. We're past the thousands point, but in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of nodes connected and propagating this information. And their number is important, but they're not equal. Some of them are a lot more important than others. Some of them are not because they have more control on the network, but if you think about economic value, a validator node is a lot more important, right? If you add 10,000 nodes, you don't make the network a lot more important. But if you add another actor like Coinbase or Binance or I don't know, or another project like Uniswap, like their nodes are very important. Not because they have more control than others, but if you're trying to think about where economic activity is happening, they're producing a lot of transactions, they're receiving a lot of transactions, like they have a lot of stuff going on in them. So that's the third one. The difference is kind of like we moved from point to point where this is like everybody connect to a few like central epicenter points to everybody connect with everyone, which on one hand is great and it's very robust and it's why you can't shut down crypto, or you could, but you basically have to shut down the entire internet. It is very, very hard. So it's very robust and it's very hard to censor, and like it has a lot of stuff going in its favor, but it's not the best in terms of performance, right? If you send something to BloxRoute, we broadcast it to everybody out there, like again, close to the speed of light. So if you want to hear about something, you listen to us. If you want to send something, you listen. I don't suggest that all the networks would depend on us. Okay, like I don't say, well, turn off P2P. No, P2P is key and important, but also leverage what we're doing, right? It's kind of like you listen to everything. Don't trust us, but listen, we'll send you stuff. Keep verifying it. Like, don't trust anything that we say, right? Keep verifying all the blocks, all the transactions. But we will be the first to tell you about transactions from out there. We will be the first to tell about blocks from out there. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I almost think of it like if you had a crowd of people and everyone is communicating to the people around them or to other people. Some people are taller, they might have louder vocal cords, and they're having different ranges or propagations of their message. You're kind of like on a pedestal with a really loud guy, with a speaker, with also flashcards. So it's like you're utilizing kind of a different magnitude of communication speed.
But I think it's a good metaphor. Like it's kind of like you have to add a bit more, which kind of like makes it like, and also give everybody like microphones connected to that. Right. So everybody who wants to say something like can kind of like connect and say something, which would reach everybody else super fast, etc. So it is true, but yeah, something along these lines.
How this is one thing that has been told to me by a few people who seem very smart, but I'm curious your reaction to this. That in the early days of blockchain, people were mining on their computers, say in the case of Bitcoin, and there was a really wide I'm sure there's a technical academic term for this, but a wide distribution of relatively equal nodes and miners. Now the mining power has been consolidated so much so that there's maybe 6 to 12 large mining companies with huge server racks and optimized machines and optimized electrical power and everything else, publicly traded, and they effectively act as a condensing or a decentralizing effect on the network. Is that am I explaining that correctly? And is that a concern in some way for the sustainability of networks?
I think everybody like to think about the good old days where everything was good, but like let's remember that in the good old days, like the nodes didn't work properly and everything like keep crashing, and so running a node, not everybody could have done it. It was a lot harder, and if you remember the 2017 bubble burst, it was kind of like, at the time, just like, I just want everything to work. Like here's the, can I make something and make the, and it goes through, right? I want to buy something. I want to sell. Can I just make the transaction, sign it, and make it work? That's the only thing I want. And now we're 2022, and like it works. And like, well, but why does it cost so much? Which is a reasonable thing to complain about. But like okay, but 5 years ago, it didn't work at all. Okay, so if we're kind of like, if I love Bitcoin. There's something very elegant. I love the Bitcoin white paper. I think Bitcoin could have been a lot more than it ended up being, just in terms of functionality and etc. But there's a big debate around that. But what I see that ended up happening is that Bitcoin kind of gave up on the functionality and focused on store of value. That's what the community decided that they want to do with it. And to that void, kind of Ethereum stepped in and kind of said, I don't think anybody thinks of is ETH money? Yes, I don't know. It's the oil that you need to kind of use, or gas that you need to use in order to utilize it. So it's obviously valuable. And with ETH 15.1, everything used actually burns. So you reduce the supply of ETH, etc. So I think everything's going in that favor. But more important than that, it's about functionality. So nowadays, again, nobody even talks, I think, about the Lightning Network, etc. But the amount of BTC just as wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum being used on Ethereum for DeFi, etc., is order of magnitude larger than the amount of being used in the Lightning Network. But my point here is to say that between Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think the functionality and store of value combined are kind of being utilized, and people could use it for that. And so going back to your question, or a part of your question, back in the old days, well, nothing, everything was very, very hard. And if you wanted to buy you wanted to lend or borrow or stake or yield farm, all these kind of stuff, you really had to write your own code, and maybe it would work, and everything would crash. So things are a lot better than the good old days where people were running it on PCs. So that's on one side, but definitely on the other side, what happened is that there is a centralization effect. And it's not about proof of work or proof of stake, etc. There are a lot more people who are participating in it. It's no longer for hobbyists. Okay, you can't be a hobbyist miner. It's not economically feasible. Okay, you run it at home, you pay electricity for it. I'm even ignoring, you need cooling for that. If you have economies of scale, if you had 10,000 of them, then the cost of the cooling wouldn't be 10,000 more. It would be just 1,000 more. So it's more economically to work at size. But even more than that, you pay electricity. If you collaborate with, natural gas and oil and companies who do flaring back at sea, they're literally burning up gas because there's no economic way to actually ship it around the world and use that energy. So energy is basically free there. You won't be able to compete with them. So it would always go to an equilibrium point, and that equilibrium point is no longer anywhere close to allowing hobbyists to participate. So that's for sure. That's in the proof of work kind of domain. If you're thinking about proof of stake is basically, well, instead of doing mining, it's basically just using a lot of computation power to do something which is just hard. Okay, it doesn't do anything, but it's hard. So you have to do a lot of it, and that's what makes it a competition. If it was easy, it was easy, but then a lot of people participated. So winning became harder. Okay, it's a very simple computation. You just need to do it 10 trillion times per second. And so where was I? So in the world of proof of stake, also a bit of a centralization pressure, because you no longer need to you don't care about electricity, etc. The idea is to abstract away the need to actually do any computation. Basically depend on how much instead of buying machine and staking that machine, basically using that capital for that, you just use that capital directly. But it would always be the case that like, well, I could either do it myself or, give it to somebody else who would do it better, run the DevOps, run the operation, etc. And they will take a small portion out of it. And that would always be like a more economical, like easier and more secure. It's kind of like, I don't want that headache on my head and to run it at home and things would break. And, I have my own job and my own stuff to do. So that's always going to happen. The idea is to make sure that the implications of centralization, whatever that means, it's a spectrum, aren't that nobody can censor and nobody can prevent anybody from participating and nobody can have an unfair advantage, let's say in DeFi or etc. And nobody could change what already happened. Okay, like the single key property of a blockchain is that like I have a copy and you have a copy of like, and everybody has their own copy of what happened and what's the state, who has how much, what's the price of everything, and everybody keep getting more updates. Oh, here's a new state. Here's a new state. Like these are more blocks added to the chain. And the idea is to make it so that changing what already happened. So I have something, it's not really true. Like you change a block in the past. Changing that needs to be between impossible and extremely economically devastating. So like you could attack it and kind of, change the last one. It will cost you so much that like you'd spend trillions of dollars to making an interruption for 6 hours or something like that. And at that point, it's kind of like it's a security budget, right? You can't prevent anybody from, take $100 trillion. Not that such number exists actually, but kind of like take really big money. Like you could make a bump into that, but make sure that like you'll have to spend really a lot of money to a very small effect. Like you can't, even if you do that, you can't steal people's money. You can't like there's still stuff that you wouldn't be able to do. And so that's kind of like the principle that we should be following. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm almost rambling here.
Yeah. So you're making the case that through the different methodologies of tracking blockchain, like proof of stake, proof of work, that each one of them is effectively better with centralization. In your example that in the beginning we just wanted transactions to go through, now they go through, and now we complain about the price of that. The upsides of the centralized mining seem to be very apparent, hence the reality that they exist. There's cheap energy offshore being burned for free. I wonder, is there a point at which what is the price to it? I clearly see the upsides of centralization on mining, but I wonder if there is a possible cul-de-sac or a dead end or some sort of tripwire that as things get consolidated behind the scenes, this is not what people that interact with the blockchain normally know what's going on. This is like the networking layer behind the scenes.
Right.
Is there some potential downside to this, like the control of the miners or influence in some way that they may have, or consolidation of the businesses that own them? Because these are centralized private companies that own these. And I just think about the incentives at that layer as things go forward.
So first, just because I'm an academic, that I have to say, like, this is the consensus layer. It's not the network layer. The network layer are the messages that they use in order to kind of like coordinate about, here's a new block, here's
gotcha.
Let's agree on that. So that's like, I have to say that.
Please do.
It's standard on me. To your second point, I think POS is less susceptible to that. It's always a concern, right? It's kind of like you could say, well, could like maybe if like the integration of proof of work is such that 3 people control the chain, and so I call it I had a good name, was the Steven Seagal scenario. Okay, somebody comes and kidnap their kids and their families and threaten to hurt them unless they do something. And if it was Steven Seagal, he'd just go after the bad guys and free them. But everybody else around the world would just like do what they're being told, right? So it's kind of like you always want to think about that. And so this is why decentralization should be measured and should be considered at all times. And again, the question is, could at any given time you could say, okay, in that scenario, somebody, a state actor or somebody very big, like could somebody, and I actually saw like an interesting conversation recently, okay, about like among like crypto founders who said like, we started getting all sorts of like profiles of developers. They look really, really good on paper. You look on GitHub, the code is really good. And then you speak with them and they turned out to be like North Koreans. Okay, and when you speak with them, it becomes very obvious. You're like, wait, they're not, like something is very wrong here. So I don't think I ever saw such a candidate, but like I saw like, yeah, we started seeing these a lot, etc. And of course, as a US company, you're not speaking with them, you're definitely not hiring them. This is like off all charts. But you could think about whether, and now with Russia and Ukraine situation, etc., you could wonder, an actor, a big actor like Russia, or and whether that's Iran, or like, it's always like the bad countries or the bad actor, etc. But think about, could they leverage, all means necessary, okay? Because it's war, right? Trade, like, could they capture the, get to the people in charge of mining and pool operations, etc., and affect that? And you should worry about that, right? And you think about that side, but if there's a war, the good guys would do it too, right? Like it's kind of like, well, we must prevent Russia from doing it. Let's get ourselves. Okay, then the U.S. would go to all these people and say, like, listen, this is like, it's like by the Patriot, what was it called?
Patriot Act
law or something like that. Yeah, exactly, something like that, and you're forced now. So the question is, if somebody comes out there, uses all necessary force and all means like they could have, what can they do and what can't they do? And for that, and if there's like two people controlling it or one, like, somebody would be able to get to them, right? Like it would be like a Snowden scenario, like scenario, something like that. Like everybody around the world will try to reach that person and try to capture him. And so it's a bit more opaque in proof of work. It's a bit easier to see in proof of stake, just because of like the metrics that you have in order to see it. But basically what you want is a situation where, yeah, you could capture it, but you need to capture like really big businesses all around the world in different jurisdictions, and not like one, and not like five, and not like 10, and not like 100. Okay, and individual people who are running it off. So you do want the individual people running their own nodes and running their own validators. Of course, they're going to be smaller and like not as large portion, etc. But it is a very good thing that they exist. And so I don't think this is something to be worried about in the context of like, oh, is this happening? No, it's not. Like, it's not anywhere close. And if somebody were to get control over the mining pools on Bitcoin, then the individual miners who care about making money more than anything else would leave these pools and start like sending their hash power towards other pools, and more pools would come out. And so this is, so again in the context of staking, like you could always say, well, I'm not in the context of Ethereum, I'm not staking here, I'm staking with that guy, or like it's very easy to take it and send it somewhere else. And so this is something that we as a community should think about as kind of like when we design the system. And when we say like, okay, what are the updates and the upgrades that we do about it? We want to make sure that we don't break that specific point, okay? So it's kind of like, what would it take to take control over it? And I think a very similar question, you could go and think about like illegal pirate media kind of thing, like let's say 15 years ago, okay, like peer-to-peer, like, and what was the name of, blanking on the name of that protocol used? No. So not in the context of crypto, in the context of file sharing,
Napster,
like illegal. So Napster was the original one, but I'm blanking on the name which I wanted to say. But the TLDR is if you had like and it's not the same, but it's similar. Everybody and all the lawmakers have like lobbies and like, this is terrible and we should stop like the ability to stream all the movies and all the TVs and whatever there on like on this damn internet that everybody can do whatever they want. And it's basically impossible to do, okay? The extreme example of that is in the Arab Spring in Egypt, okay? People used social media in order to kind of like talk about like the Mubarak regime, etc., and how terrible it is. And Mubarak, being Mubarak, like, you know, has total control. I don't want to speak. Well, eventually he shut down the internet, okay? The thing that happened when he shut down the internet is that everybody just went out to the streets, okay? That did not go well for him. And so like to some extent, when you have these peer-to-peer and social connections and networks, the only way to turn this thing off is to turn everything off. And that's like the nuclear option, which is not necessarily nuclear for the other side. It might be nuclear for you. Okay, so you know, the US could say, for the good of every, like, we can't allow for funds to transfer to, I don't know, whether that's North Korea or Iran or Russia or whatever. We're shutting down the entire internet because we can't let that happen. I don't think any US regime would survive this without like, okay, you're being replaced like now. Okay, like the cost of this to society and to democracy is too high. And so, yes, you could theoretically close or shut down crypto if you shut down the entire internet, but it's very questionable whether you can actually do it. And again, Egypt is a great example because there was somebody there who could actually do it. And he held all the guns and he held the army, and he still, like, it still ended up with Mubarak being removed.
So, a good lesson in history, really, you know, to think that effectively what he's doing there is he's removing the communication layer between people. And so people can't exist without communicating. Unless they're locked in a room alone. I mean, that's the other alternatives. You imprison everyone, but otherwise people need to be able to communicate with people. And then you
need to scare people. Right? Now, you can't really control all the people all the time. You need to scare them to behave in such a way, and etc. And it worked well for Mubarak for a while, but once the Egyptian people decided like they had enough, and the uproar started with the Arab Spring, you can't really take it back. And so, but going back to our point of our discussion, it's kind of like, I have such a lot of like sunlight off it. I hope the camera is.
Oh, you're fine.
So there is a question of like, can consolidation behind the scenes provide anybody with like so much power that they control what happened or what doesn't happen, etc. On some, you know, funky chains that are very few actors and like basically the dev team controls everything and they hold all the stake with their friends or whatnot, then that is the case. But when you're looking at real decentralized systems, whether that's Bitcoin, whether that's Ethereum, whether that's a few others, then the really answer, like, is it possible for somebody to take control over enough people to cause a lot of damage? What would be the cost of doing it, and what would be the damage? Okay, because even in the Bitcoin network, as an example, or in the Ethereum network, like, even if you had total control of everything, you could start maybe undoing transactions, but you still wouldn't be able, if somebody sent me, you know, a year ago some ETH or some Bitcoin, you still won't be able just to take it from me. Okay, like, there are also, maybe my transaction won't go through, right? I'll try to send it and that won't go through, but you won't be able just to change everything as you see fit. And that's a key point, right? The idea that, like, that even the damage that could be done, what is it limited to? How much effort? How much, like, what would be the cost of such an attack? You know, between the two things, and the proof of stake is even worse. Like, if you do such behaviors, you get slashed. You have less and less money, etc. So I'm not actually concerned about this. Rather than, it should be like something that we always keep at the back of our mind. That when we design stuff, we should be aware of.
I like the way that you framed it out to say, what would be the worst possible thing with somebody that had full power? What could they do? It's a good sort of litmus test. I want to ask you a little bit about BloxRoute. You guys are quite a ways into it now. You're started in 2017. I think there's what I saw was 70 million in venture raised, and on to the races.
So 70 million is just like our last round.
Okay.
I think we're we raised like a total something like 100 million at this point. And maybe, I'll let you finish the question before I hop in.
Yeah, sure. When I think about what you described as what the company does is kind of effectively being the fastest and most efficient broadcasting network on the consensus layer. I do want to leave it open for you to add this, but I wanted to ask you about how you think about growing it, and what are the most important things that you want to make sure that your team does right, because it's quite a unique business. And I'm curious if you think of it as a centralized business in that sense, or if you think of it as a decentralized organization.
So these are excellent questions. So let's start from the beginning. Like, we explain what we do. We send it fast. We receive fast. Faster is better, right? You have opportunities, but let's dive slightly deeper into quantifying it. If your DeFi started with Ethereum, and we started all our services with DeFi on Ethereum. If let's say you're a DeFi trader, okay, and you see a block and you see an opportunity, okay, like an arbitrage or a liquidation or a price, you want to see something, you would decide this is where I sell or I buy or whatever. And you send your transaction, and that transaction needs to be sent around to reach the pool that controls the miner or that produces the blocks in order for your transaction to take place. But if it takes you, let's say, 600 milliseconds or so, that's 600 milliseconds, 0.6 seconds, okay? If it takes you 0.6 seconds just to receive that block and to see the opportunity, then in 4% of the cases, a new block was already mined by the time you saw it, okay? So a new block was mined, it included new transaction, prices have changed, liquidation, arbitrage, everything. You lost that opportunity. That opportunity, somebody else already took it because it took you so long just to see the opportunity. And maybe you react to it super fast, literally 0 time passes, and you send your transaction, and that takes 600 to 800 milliseconds, so 0.6 to 0.8 seconds in order to reach the pools and their miners. Then in total, something like 10% of the opportunities are closed to you. Okay, like that, and that's a lot. Okay, that means that if you're a trader and you want to be competitive, etc., 10% of the opportunities you're too slow to capture. My favorite analogy, it's like you're playing a shooter online, okay? But you're one of those guys that have really bad lags, okay? So you see somebody, you shoot him, and you're like, wait, what happened in reality? Somebody came here, he shot you, you're dead, he moved on, and you'll catch up in a second, okay? Like you're just too slow. The game had moved on. DeFi is a game, it already happened, and you're seeing it with really bad lag, and you're going to die. You're not going to be successful there, because everybody else are faster than you. And we're kind of like reducing these timescales by between half a second and a second, sometimes more. Like on BSC, we give our customers the blocks faster in 99% of the cases. So they hear it from us rather than the peer-to-peer network first in 99% of the second. And they hear it on average a whole second faster.
Wow. Okay, and this is, you said BSC?
Yeah, Binance Smart. So we're under Ethereum, we're under Polygon, we're under BSC, and now we're expanding to Solana. And so if you're trying to understand what is our value, we open up opportunities which right now are close to you. You'll see it faster. You do you, okay? You're the trader or the market maker. And the funny thing, you don't even need to be a market maker or trader on DeFi. Maybe you're a big actor on CeFi, okay? You're trading on your market maker on Binance and on Coinbase. Okay, market makers, for those who don't know, are the ones who are kind of like, if they think the price is $100, they'll put buy orders up until, let's say, 99.5. They'll buy it cheaper, and they'll say it at 100.5. So they constantly think, oh, what they think is the right price, and kind of create a buy and sell above this price. And they basically, they'll buy it cheap here, they'll sell it cheap here, and all in all, statistically, they'll make money. But these are the same assets. Okay, if somebody's selling 10,000 ETH on Uniswap somewhere, that's going to affect the price not only on Uniswap. This is ETH, which is the same ETH everywhere on Binance and Coinbase. So everybody needs to see this information. And because DeFi moved from, in 2019, annual volume was like $100 million, but in 2021, it was $1 trillion. Okay, so it's like, this is really big money. So even if you're not participating in DeFi, you need to see this information. This is kind of like our value. We'll let you see it fast. We'll let you send fast. At the beginning, I said we're also about connectivity, not only latency. So connectivity is important, but also some customers came to us and they said, every time I send something, I touch DeFi, I send an order, somebody front run me and background. So I'm being sandwiched. Like I always lose money whenever I touch DeFi. So we introduced a service called private transactions. Basically, give us the transaction, we'll send it to the validators or to the miners and the pools. We don't send it to everybody, just to them. And they don't tell everybody. They'll add it to the next block if you pay them the fee, just like everybody else. But nobody would see it in the mempool. Okay, this transaction, nobody would front run you. So this is about, and we can do it because we're connected to all the validators and all the miners and all the pools. And so this is kind of like the connectivity that we do. And at this point, we're actually quite big. We're routing $1.5 billion of trades per day. Okay, so that means that a big chunk of all the DeFi activity is being routed through us because everybody who's big kind of have heard about it at some point and tried us out and say, oh, this is very much that much faster, and I'm making more money this way. And so this is kind of like what and we're not decentralized. Okay, we're a more performant network. You could think of it if you're a DeFi like a DeFi trader or something, and you run your node and it's connected to the rest of the network, and you could either use a 10 gigabit link connected sitting at the data center, or a 96 kilobyte per second modem from the analog modem from the 90s, which does these funny noises whenever you try to connect it, like beep, all these kind of stuff. And so you could use that, but you will lose, right? Every time. So we're like this additional connectivity point. Like it's kind of like, think of us as another peer. You're connected to all the others. Also connect to us, or also to listen to streams from our cloud API from us. But basically connect to us. Listen to everybody. Don't trust us. Connect with everyone. But we will be the first to tell you stuff in 99 point something % of the cases. Okay, so we'll send you a transaction. You'll see them from the others too, right? You want this peer-to-peer redundancy and to make sure everything is robust. But we'll tell you about these first. Then you'll hear it from somebody else. We'll just tell you a second before.
Right.
So I think of ourselves as a centralized service that does that. We're not a decentralized protocol that try to do anything like that. I had some thoughts on can it become that way, but it's very hard because in order to run something like this, you really need a dedicated team to do it. You can't, it's not like running a node. Everybody could do it in their own home if they invest in that. No, you need a team, it's constantly monitored, etc. So that's kind of why what we do is valuable. And if you remember from the beginning of our conversation, I wanted to go to academia. And, never thought of myself as an entrepreneur and a CEO and all of that. But when me and Alex and later my third co-founder, Eyal, when we were talking about this, then we crunched some numbers. Okay, this is what the reason people invested in us is the following. Okay, if you think that out of all the transactions happening out there, let's say only 10% of the transactions are, DeFi related trading transaction benefiting from, seeing fast, sending fast, latency, connectivity kind of thing. So if only 10% of the transactions are relevant, and if we can capture from our customers, they're willing to pay us, let's say on average, $10 per transaction, okay? And we're seeing people just to execute the transaction, they're willing to pay tens, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars per transaction. So in average, let's say something like $10 per transaction. And right now we're supporting ETH and BSC and Polygon, which combined are doing, let's say, 20 million transactions each day or so. And last piece, say, well, DeFi grew by 10,000x in the past 2 years. Let's say 7-9 years from now, it does another, let's say, only 10x bigger than where we are right now. Then if you multiply these numbers, if you say, if we make $10 per transaction, 10% of the transaction times 20 million transactions a day, times 365, 10x bigger in the future, then we could be making something like $70 billion per year in revenues. Okay, the numbers here are huge. Okay, and we're like, nobody's doing this. Okay, like we're the only networking. We built this networking infrastructure before DeFi was even DeFi. Okay, like we built this, and then it turned out to be extremely valuable. We knew it was valuable, but we didn't understand how. And the thing that's happening right now is that we have this cool network effect working in our favor. We actually have two networks effects. One of them is technical. People use us, and because we're faster, but the more people who get connected to us, then the better our reach. So we're seeing more transactions, we're seeing more blocks, so we become faster. So the more people who join, the faster we become, the more value we create, and this kind of like feeds itself. So it's very, very hard to compete with us on speed, on the technicality. But the second thing, and more interesting from my perspective, is that we're routing quite a lot of trades each day. And so obviously the more projects and more blockchains we support, the more value our traders get, right? We support ETH, we support Polygon and BSC, and we see more customers coming to us and using us because they're benefiting and they can trade on different chains and more opportunities, etc. But now we're seeing also the other side. The more traders that we have, all of a sudden, projects want to come and work with us and get connected with us because they want easy access to our traders and our customers and our users. If we can make it easy for them to use their DeFi products, then they're looking for usage, okay? Crypto projects have tons of money and speculation, but the really hard thing that everybody are really trying to get is real, actual usage. Not wash trading, not pretending, not playing with the metric. Actual users using the DeFi product. And so all of a sudden we see like the more project we work with, the more traders we have, but also the more traders we have, the more projects that come and work with us. And this is kind of like how we're expanding even further and further. And so this is kind of like really feeds itself really nicely. This is like we're moving to the work, like projects are willing to pay us like basis points over the volume that we send to them. And this is for us, it's kind of like the crown jewel of our offer of kind of like where we're heading in our business model, etc. So we're providing value both to the traders and users who use us and the projects. Okay, so we kind of like, and we capture a bit of value from both, right? It's kind of like, I don't want to charge a lot from the traders. I want them to participate. And I don't want to charge a lot I want both. And it kind of like feeds like both sides really, really nice.
Right.
And so to the last piece of your question, where are we going from here? We're now releasing, so similar along these lines, Serum on top of Solana is a really good project, and it has like tons of liquidity. Let's say or a third of the liquidity of Uniswap or something like that, or at least I don't know. Prices of everything came crashing in the past month or so I haven't looked it up. But that order of magnitude, so a third, but the usage is much smaller. Okay, it's like 1/30, because it's very hard to trade on it. Like it's order book, it's on top of Solana, it's very like it's very valuable. But if you're trading on Ethereum and BSC and Polygon and all these EVM compatible chains, or EVM chains, then you don't have the setup to trade on. So like the way you write transactions is different. The way you sign them is different. You need to listen to the Solana network, which you don't have a setup for. So everything is different and it's hard. So we're building this like API that allows people to just utilize Serum on top of Solana. So anybody who's big in trading, they're like, here's an easy way for you to make money that way. We'll be working, like our job is to try to help them and make as much money as they can and utilize Serum as well for their trading. And we're very excited about that. That's like the biggest thing that we're working. Literally this week, we're releasing our, to our earliest users who are like, some of them are good friends of ours in terms of like have been using been our customers for a long time. We're giving it to them. They're providing feedback, what works, what doesn't work as well as we wanted, etc. So
say the name of it again.
This is like the Serum, SERUM.
Got it.
Serum.
Serum.
This is where my Israeli accent like trips me. It's kind of like, no, it's not serum, it's serum or something like that. Yeah, that one. Live with a guy.
Yeah.
My accent sucks. I'll think you manage. Anyway, so for us, so like in terms of product, that's the next thing that we're releasing, and we're working with other Solana-based projects. We're kind of like, okay, providing similar offerings. But now that we're talking about it, I think the biggest challenge is going to be moving from being a small team. Like we closed, by the end of 2021, we were 16 people or so. We did really, really, really well in 2021. Almost everybody are developers, like it's kind of like without marketing, without sales, etc. But now we already doubled our team size, and we're going to double it again very soon. So then to keep being very agile and being super nimble and very much on top of everything, but at the same time, building marketing, building customer success teams, building sales, working at the large, like more DevOps, more developers, more engineers. That's kind of like, okay, we have more teams. We're more around the world now with support. So this is a challenge, which is, I don't think it's specific to crypto, but it's always a challenge, okay? Like moving from a small company to a medium small, right? We're not getting that much bigger. We're still going to be like less than 100 people, let's say, definitely in the upcoming year or so. But that change is I think, going to be the thing that we'll work hard to make it right. That isn't an easy change, but any growing company kind of like needs to go through that. So like we're doing it. I'm glad with the results so far. But that's, I think, the biggest thing that we're facing.
Man, what an exciting project to be a part of. It's so cool how it perfectly fits, through no coincidence, your background and your unique background in a space that at the time, I'm sure you just couldn't, and you didn't have any clue as to the gravity and impact worldwide that it would have. I'm sure you've spent countless nights sitting in the lab or in the office somewhere and just thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And sure enough, it's like the networking layer on blockchain happens to be an incredibly useful skill set.
So it does, everything fits really, really well. But let's be very real. Let's open it up to the public. Let's look inside how the real work actually works. Okay, so we've been doing this. Okay, so we build the networking infrastructure, and DeFi happened. We're kind of like, we're doing all of that, and we're like building features for paying customers. But it was actually, Hasib from Dragonfly.
Yeah,
Hasib Qurashi.
I do.
So I love Hasib. He led our previous round, and Dragonfly in general are great, and I love him specifically. He's, I think, our best investor, like the best investor that we have, and if not the best, then one of our two best. So he's a friend. He's awesome. He's really great. And the reason that we allowed him to lead our previous round is kind of like, I had really like late night numbers, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., like speaking with him, kind of like really late night, and kind of like we were doing all of that, but we didn't have like a crystallized understanding of what is it that we do, even while we were doing it. And he was like very helpful. Like we had like, he's like, listen, here's how you should be thinking of yourself. It's kind of like, you're building the network layer that everybody else needs. Okay, if you're a networking guy, these are like the middle boxes that of the internet that allows everything to actually be very, very fast and actually be effective. And when you go to Amazon, it doesn't go actually all the way to the other side of the world to give you an image. It brings it like literally from next door, so it's fast and everything is smooth and easy. Same for Netflix, right? You scroll through the different shows and whatnot, and everything seems to be working really well. And there are a lot of like small caching and techniques that are being used for that. So we're doing a lot of that for blockchains. But I want to kind of like, if the audience is listening to this, and it's kind of like, it's not like we have like, here's the vision, and we just like drove there. It's like, okay, we had a goal, everything worked. No, in reality, it's kind of like you come up with something and then it doesn't work. So you move it a bit. Okay, so we do this. And it worked, but then this thing is, and eventually, this is all very anticlimactic. Okay, there isn't a point where you say, okay, we did it. Kind of like, okay, so this happened, but now this thing doesn't happen. Okay, so now we do this. And I think this is where my academic background is actually very helpful. People talk about like the ivory tower. If you're talking about the ivory tower and how everything is easy there, you have no idea what you're talking about. Basically, your job is like, you write a paper, and the first time you submit it somewhere, and it gets rejected, and you're devastated. Kind of like, wow, but it was such a great idea, and the reviewers are morons, and they don't understand anything, and etc. And then, a year afterwards or a few months after, you send somewhere else, and you get rejected again, and it's like, okay, it's still hard, not as hard, but it's still very hard. And after a few years, you have like an elephant skin. It's kind of like you send it, kind of come back, and they said no. It's kind of like, I don't care. You're just jugging through. Okay, you're going to make it, and you don't care if everybody in the world could say no to you, and you don't care, and you'll try it, and it would fail, so you'll change it, and it would fail again, so you change it again, and you change it again. And this is like these two things are very, very similar. The only thing is that like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I know I'm going to get there, and there is very like, I might reach some, you head to Japan and you find yourself in like, I don't know, in Singapore, like, I don't know, you're heading somewhere, you reach somewhere else, but you keep on going. And this is kind of like, there isn't a point where you made it, and it's not you start with a vision of what you're going to do. Now you start with this smart idea that you like a lot, and you try to do it, right? We started with skating, and we're going to do this and allow blockchain to scale. So we built the entire thing, and then it didn't work. But then this other thing worked out, and then the next thing worked out, and then it didn't again. And again, you keep zigzagging, and you make progress. And then you're kind of like, you look back and say, well, you really did make a lot of like progress during this time. It's like how far you've got. But I don't know, maybe it's different for other people. There's literally no point of like climate, like, okay, we made it kind of thing. It's kind of like, yeah, we like at that point you're going to make it, but you're worried about like these other three things, and then you do them, but then you're worried about like the next stuff. And it just like it really is a journey. You just like keep on going. Does that make sense?
Not only it makes sense, it's been my experience multiple times over in starting companies. There is a spectrum of how confident, how consistent the initial idea is to the fruition of the idea. Generally, simpler ideas tend to stay the same, whereas like you have a more complex idea, well, there's more nuance to it, so it ricochets around the idea chasm a bit, and it pops out. But regardless, it's like moving forward is the only option. So I think I could see the parallels between that and academia, for sure.
Yeah, it's very similar, and I think that this should give maybe it's the wrong term, but it should give hope to people. It's kind of like nobody actually comes with a goal and start and actually get it. This is not how life works. And it's kind of like you start something and you have no idea what you're doing, and you continue going, and you still don't know what you're doing. And then you continue going. And again, like, okay, our company is fairly big now. It's making a lot of millions of dollars, and we'll be making even a lot more millions of dollars. And we still don't know what it's kind of like, we know what we do here, but here are the next problems.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's always more problems that you're going to face. And that's just it. The reason like it never changed. Just work with what you got, and like
totally,
like anybody could do it. You just need to continue to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone, when you say it though, for everyone, that it is different for everyone. You know, you're called to do this. Definitely. Like your life path is down here, but the same metaphorical pattern is true. It's like, okay, if if I feel this calling in this direction, like I can see something that can be better, or I understand the jigsaw pieces enough to build something, the something that you create by building a few pieces together unlock the next phase. And also with time, because as you build something, the world reacts with some way, and it opens up new problems that you can uniquely solve given your unique vantage point. I think if anything, people underestimate their unique vantage point. Like one of the things I ask all guests in pre-show is, given your unique life story, what insights or trends or beliefs do you have? And that's so powerful, and it unlocks often for people such a insight, because we only have our own life to see through. You only have your senses, your thoughts, and so what you think is true from late night reading on Quora or Reddit or whatever, you kind of assume that, oh, everyone knows this. But in reality, like a very, very small percentage of people know this. And also the other thing that you know a lot about. So combining them together that's where the magic, that's literally creation.
So I totally agree. And let's talk about this for a second. Let's delete part of the technical conversation from earlier, because this is way more interesting. But so while it's true that my understanding of the network layer, and I'm smart and blah and academic and etc., but I'm a CEO, okay? As a CEO, most of what of my superpowers come from, what I did when I was like 22? For a year, I was a bartender and a waiter. Mm-hmm. And everything I know how to do as a CEO came from doing that, okay? It's about being nice and, having small talk and being able to communicate with a bunch of strangers in all sorts of like awkward situations and get friendly with them. And well, the original idea of BloxRoute, it kind of came from my PhD dissertation, and it sounded really great, et cetera, et cetera. I can't even touch our code. I don't even know where the repo is. I'm not allowed to do any of it. Our engineers, Eyal, my COO, who runs the entire, my job is I understand what is it that we do. I understand it, so I can explain it, okay, better than ours. I can't actually code it, okay. I don't even know what the code looks like at this point, but it's kind of I can talk about it, I can explain it, and I can be I can be excited about what is it that we do. And I think that if you have if you have it into you, oh, it would be cool to do something, find a bunch of other people who have very different characteristics. It's kind of I do this. Eyal, my COO, is the guy with 2 feet on the ground. He's in his mid-50s. He had expertise, performance expert running field engineering in startups for the past, 30 years or something like that. So he runs that, and he does budget, and he does all the stuff, which I'm kind of it's not that he doesn't know it, I don't, but I don't even want to know how to do it. And he's kind of okay, and everybody should play on their strength and their superpowers. And again, it's kind of you would say, well, I am very into crypto, a lot more than all of our engineers or almost all of our engineers, etc. This is kind of what I do. But I do just a small piece of what is that we do. And so going back to your point, people, what does it take to start a company? Just do it. Just waste, $1,000 or so on, signing up and, creating an entity, and don't do it locally, spend another $500 and make sure it's a Delaware company or something like that. And turns out you don't know what you're doing, but nobody, when we created the company, we had no idea what we were doing. And we were talking with investors, we didn't know what we were doing. And when we started to get customers and what to offer them, we didn't know what we were doing. But you keep not knowing what you're doing, you mess it up at the beginning, but you get better. And then you do something else and you mess it up again, but then you get better. And that's just that. And so I think people underestimate their ability to go out there and create new things because it sounds scary. Yeah. I think it's kind of well, I don't know how to go about it. And that's exactly, you don't know how to go. So you go and you do it. Yeah. Google, how do I start a company? And you'll find a bunch of answers. And you go and do it. And again, you mess it up a million times, but you mess it up, you change or correct course. Basically continue correcting course forever, and you make progress.
It's so true, especially now with Google. It's like just type in your problem and read and just put in the time. You can get 90% of the way there. Are you writing, Uri, online? Are you Twittering? Are you active on any public?
So I'm on Twitter. If you Google Uri, URI, and BloxRoute, like there's only one Uri Klarman out there. That's me. And so like you can find me on Twitter. I'm tweeting a lot about what we do. Also a bunch of like random crypto nonsense, because it's very hard to stop tweeting on crypto nonsense. So follow me, follow BloxRoute. If you're into DeFi and into trading, or like reach out to us, speak with us. Like we can help people be better traders, or at least have a better setup. Okay, so like I'm not. If you're a small time trader, etc., like I don't know if you actually want to play this game or not. But if you're a big time like trader, then everybody else are using. If you're not using us, you're like being left behind.
I love it. It's like the spinal cord of the industry, lightning fast.
Something along these lines. That's a good metaphor.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I absolutely love talking to you, and congrats on the progress. And I hope you encounter and overcome many obstacles in the future.
Thanks, Mike. This was super fun.
All right. Take care, man.
Bye.